Start now. Start now.
Okay. The meeting of the Governance Committee of the Bethlehem IDA is now in session. It is 8 o'clock on Friday, May 19th. Welcome all those who are in attendance today and following us on our live stream. Yes. First order of business is a call to order and a quorum approval. I'll go around the room and make sure that we have all our board members here. I'm Dave Cadera. I'm chair of the board of the Governance Committee.
Victor Franco, committee member.
Richard Cotlow, committee member.
And Kate Hedgeman, executive director and counsel.
Seeing that we have a quorum, this meeting is now official. The next order of business is approval of the minutes from the March 28th Governance Committee meeting. I will entertain any motion to approve or suggest changes to the minutes.
Move to approve as written.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the minutes of the March 8th, 2023 Governance Committee meeting have been approved. We do have some new business to discuss, a couple of agenda items. The first is a discussion of a proposed timeline for the application, project application review. Is my understanding that the Bethlehem IDA at the moment does not have a written process or timeline for reviewing the applications. And so as a governance committee, we've been asked to discuss a possible timeline and written documentation as to how we go about accepting and reviewing project applications. Kate has provided us with sort of a general framework for a application process and timeline review document. And I will open the floor to discussion on any on the draft process and any suggested changes, clarifications, questions that any board member has.
I have a question on item number 3.
Mm-hmm.
Unless somebody has something on what does deemed complete mean?
Sometimes you'll get an application and like there's blanks in it, or they've failed to provide an attachment, a description of the project, something like that. So initially that'll come in to me, and it won't even get, like, if we need more information or something's not filled in, I would ask them to do that before we would even get to that point.
Because we were, as you recall, we were presented with an application which didn't even address the need. Okay.
Right.
All right. And it was presented to the board. And I'd like to make sure we avoid something like that ever happening again.
And I think that's what this process is intended to do, actually.
Okay, but
Because I think I remember, I think I was on the board at that point, right? For that one, I hadn't yet stepped into this role. And it was just one of those, here you go, like at the meeting, approve this. And, I think while you were the most vocal, I think the rest of us too felt like, okay, we're just seeing this now. We had to approve it. That was the board deal.
Yeah, but there we had one person deem it complete.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So you deem it complete, or you and the chair?
Yes. So it would come to me first, and if it's what I call administrative, like there's a fill in the blank missing or something, I might just go ask the applicant to take care of it. But I think the formal review, normally it goes to me and the chair, but this goes to the whole, I had mentioned a while back, whether you wanted to have a committee or one or two more people that do the initial review quick to make sure that it is complete and they're satisfied with it, we can certainly do that.
That would
to
make
you.
sense.
It could be I mean, whatever you want to do is fine, but we should approve, recommend that the WHO is going to review it initially. Just the paper, for
Mhm.
not for analyzing the project, but is there enough information there for us to go forward?
No, I think that's a good idea, but I think that ties into, so the question I raised several meetings ago about the application itself. I think there are ways of amending the application document itself that synthesizes what the project is all about and the impact it's going to have on Bethlehem and make it easier for us to look at, whether it's like a 3 or 4 page introduction, discussion, summary. And if that sort of satisfies us, we can move it on, even if there are things in the application, the 44 other pages that are left blank, we at least have a sense of what the project's about, enough that we could then entertain a more formal discussion and acceptance of the application, and have a meeting and decide what more information we need and what more in the application, if there's something that's missing that we can ask for. But I think the idea here is just, this as I understand it, is do we have enough information presented to us early on in the process so we have an understanding of what the project is going to do?
Maybe,
What the potential parameters of financial assistance would be, what the impact on the town is going to be, and we can get into the particulars after we accept the application, when we have a more full-throated discussion of the project.
do you think it would be too cumbersome if we have a application presented by management, have one meeting in between the time we go to public meeting number 1? Okay, we have a board meeting where we can see the application, and then the next meeting we vote on public meeting number 1. So we can deem it complete. If it's presented at a board meeting, we discuss it, okay, and the next meeting we vote for meeting number 1. So it delays it 60 days, but I'm not worried about the delay. That's me. I might be the only one not worried about the delay. So we have time to think about it.
It's like aging.
What?
It's aging. It's got to be published.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that way,
But I think that's what gets it here. I think the idea would be, somebody has an initial review and makes a decision to recommend that we look at it, and then we look at it as a board and decide this is sufficient for us to then have a more formal meeting
Okay.
and discussion. But I still think the idea was somebody like, staff, Kate, others would look at, say, this is all right, this is a real project, a potential real project. We need more information, but it's worth bringing to the attention of the board. You don't want everything brought to the
no.
board attention, right? So
Oh,
you
no,
have to
they
have
can kill it.
Right, they have to have an early filter.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not worried about them putting the kibosh on the project
Right.
and not presenting it. That's fine with me.
that was my next question, so we'll get to that.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I've seen it done both ways, where it comes into the director and maybe there's a committee, or, the chair reviews it, whatever the case may be. If it was something that was so blatant that, I'm trying to think of an example, like why it wouldn't qualify, or
The
something.
formaldehyde factory, that's the town of Bethlehem, boogeyman.
Yeah, but that, and this is why I was going to ask this question. Like, I think just about every application, unless there was some overriding, like, clear reason, has to get reviewed at least by everybody. Because one, I don't necessarily have the administrative authority not to block, or not put
Right,
something
right.
on the agenda, and neither does one person or a chair, or, So I guess what I'm saying is, and I'll have to reframe my question. My original question was, sometimes boards too if they don't want to move forward with something, they just say that. And it's communicated to the applicant versus it coming to the board and voting no. So, I think that's the question is what are your thoughts on that? Does everything come to a yes or no? Or is this sort of at that public meeting number 2, the applicant comes, they make their presentation. At the next meeting, normally you would either say, we're going to approve it, if it was ready, or not.
Mhm.
And, do you want it all to advance? And then the same question is for the first public meeting, shouldn't it all advance? And then on the record, we say why we don't want to move it forward. It's transparent and I guess I'm not comfortable with me making a decision.
No,
You know what I mean?
I
Like,
don't think you would, but at the same time, as I sort of understand the overall approach to town, but this is presented to us for financial assistance. It's gone through a town planning, zoning
sure,
process.
sure, yeah.
So there has been some effort to validate the project itself and the merits of the project and the seriousness of the applicants and all that. So when we're getting it, it's already been through multiple weeks and months of review. So I still think we as a board or a subcommittee or something have to clear it for consideration by the full board. But it's gone through a significant vetting process already when we get it. So I don't think we would get too many projects that are incompatible with the overall.
I never thought that we would.
Yeah.
Well, the one scenario I can think of, and it's just because I'm always in it, if you have a project that they know what they're doing, it's fast moving, it's in planning. It's not approved yet. They have a few more meetings. So, at what point, like, we're not going to approve benefits unless you've completed that planning and you have all your approvals.
Right.
So, that's the one caveat to this process is, all things being equal, it'll flow this quickly, but, we really can't approve your benefits until the project is approved by the planning board, really.
I think like on Canon, we had like approved to a point,
Right.
like we had approved to a point where we knew once they signed up upstairs, it was a go with us.
Right. So, we would get to that, but that's sort of the one, and there could be a number of reasons why that we would pause a little bit and not necessarily run through this entire.
Has the IDA ever put the cart before the horse? So in other words, we provide like contingent approval. So, we approve contingent upon approval by the town planning board.
We haven't done it here,
Okay.
and I haven't done it in my other IDAs either.
Yeah.
Unless there was some overriding factor, like the financing of it, they needed the approvals, you know what I mean?
Yeah. because
Sometimes you
if-
might consider it, but
Right, because I can envision there might be a scenario where planning just takes a long time. And by the time they approve it and then, we formally begin our process, now we got a very tight window for them to do what they need to do in order to actually,
right.
pull the trigger on the
The
project.
port was
Right.
like that. We basically approved the port until we didn't have an official vote. But because we're waiting for seeker, is it?
Yeah, it kind of goes side by side to a point, right?
Right.
And then, we really can't, unless there's an overriding reason, approve the financing piece, until planning is officially done.
Okay. So there would be no formal like preemptive approval contingent upon.
I haven't seen it. I mean, I could see where in the process, say that it's contingent, their bank needs to know, like, because the numbers all have to work,
Yeah, sure.
then that could be presented to us and you could make a decision then, but we haven't, you would know more than, I haven't been around as long, but I haven't seen it.
Okay.
I think that raises the larger question of when does the IDA get involved in the first place?
Right.
And yeah, I think I've always felt that we were always involved got involved initially more at the tail end than up front. So, that just goes through the town board, the planning board, zoning board, whatever it's going to go to. And sometimes, as a board member, you may not even know there's a project under discussion by the town, and all of a sudden it's presented to you as an IDA member, and we haven't really been involved. And unless you just sort of go to a town planning board meeting or something, you may never know about it.
Yeah.
And whether there's a role for us up front in the initial, doesn't even have to be the review, but we should at least be part of the, should, excuse me, hear about something at the time it's being presented to the town board or to the zoning board or to the planning board or something like that. So that we can at least begin some internal discussions as to whether or not we think this is a viable project, something we want to learn more about or discuss.
Generally, you have two kinds of applicants too. You have the sophisticated, we've done projects before, we know what the financing is going to look like. We need IDA financing, that but-for box to check it. And so those are the ones that kind of go side by side. It's going through planning, it's going, because they know we're going to put the application in, so that's done, and the IDA can actually see what we're thinking. Planning progresses, and then we're kind of like piggybacking on that. Then you got a different kind of applicant where they're pretty much done with planning, and they say, oh wait, there's financing, and usually we'll have those meetings and I'll say, could you do the project without this financing? And at that point, it's usually, well, yeah, well, that's a big consideration for this board, and, it may not be worth your time doing it. We're happy to look at it, but you just told me that, So it depends on kind of, like you said, 20 minutes ago, if it's a sophisticated 10 million, big project, that's what should be coming, because it needs us.
These aren't houses.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, but I agree. But the project that goes through the whole process has already invested a significant amount of money in sunk costs. Okay, and now that box, would you do this but not for the IDA? Either they're going to lie or going to say, we've already invested a couple $1 million, we have to do it.
But they have to show, that's where all the numbers come in. You have to show on paper that, we've even gone so far as to get letters from banks and financing to say, we need this capital or this, tax incentive in order for us to lend on this.
That's,
that kind of checks that box,
make
right?
sure they borrow from that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's coaching too.
But does that answer your original question about what constitutes being complete?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a good, robust discussion for you to lead at the board meeting.
Okay.
Okay, to me, that's the most important thing about this whole ordeal is the application complete? When we do, vote on it.
Right.
Okay, vote to the next step, not vote for the final, for the next
Right.
step.
So what I think I'll do is, before that original public meeting number 1, we would almost have a pre-meeting to that. So there's actually 3 board meetings.
That's my point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can see, this gets a little bit down the road in terms of the agenda, but what I think what I would like to see is almost an application, a 2-part application. One would be a sort of, call it, for lack of a better word, a summary, which describes, the intent of the project, the objective, the financing, whether
An executive summary.
Whether it's compatible with the town plan, the town comprehensive plan. I got a list of 15 things here. And then the second is sort of the the attachment, which is a lot of these check the boxes things about, have you ever been sued?
Mhm.
And any of these guys under, been in jail, and, all the other things that we have in 40 other pages. And you can do both things on parallel tracks.
agree
The
with
board can get that summary document, say, yeah, this looks like something I'm interested in learning more about. And at the same time, then, they and Kate and others can be working on developing all the background.
But in that
And
first
just-
summary, you should have the scope. the
Yeah,
dollar
yeah, I
amount,
mean, we can talk about
yeah,
that
and why,
on the
okay,
next step.
what they're
Mhm.
looking for and why.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And so we get a document that's easy to understand.
Right.
And I don't need to know all the particulars of the project, other than to know this looks like something that is certainly attractive to the town, for the
I'll let
town.
Victoria worry about the economic analysis.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
I don't really
where
care
most
about
of-
the economic
No,
analysis.
no, and that can be done on a separate track.
You may
Well-
be interested,
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
because you're a regulator.
I spent 40 years in budget, and I was never interested in the economics. Okay, but we can get to that when we get to the next item.
Okay.
Victor, do you have any other questions?
It's more along the lines of just learning how a regular process,
Right.
works through, and that's not really appropriate for this space. I could always ask you offline or something.
Okay. But I do have some questions. I think it sort of ties back to some of the things we've just discussed. I'm not, my biggest concern was sort of the sequencing here. You had the public meeting, a public hearing, board approval, and we had something had to be submitted 2 weeks prior to the next regular meeting. I think some of that just confused me a little bit. And I think it gets back to what we just talked about, how many meetings we have and what the sequence should be. But it seems to me that, on number 2, for example, we talked about the application fee should be submitted no later than 2 weeks, or the application, I guess, should be submitted no later than 2 weeks prior to the regularly scheduled board meeting. No later than meaning 1 week, right? As opposed to 3 weeks. Later, as you say, submitted no later than 2 weeks prior to a regular scheduled board meeting.
Right,
that
so-
means
It
it has to be at least 2 weeks.
yes.
Yeah, okay. Do we want to put that kind of time frame on, or should we just say, I think I had something, is that necessary? We can accept an application anytime, but the action that we would take is contingent on a number of factors. So it could be on a board, could be scheduled for a board meeting in 2 weeks, or 4 weeks, or 6 weeks, or, depending on when we feel comfortable acting on it. So can we accept an application anytime? And it's up to us then to put it on a meeting agenda, and that doesn't have to be, we could do it the next day in theory if we felt this is a real simple kind of.
Yes, how it normally comes to me and why I wrote it that way is council will call or they'll email me and say, how far in advance to your next board meeting do you need us to submit the application?
Right, okay.
So if the expectation is that it's going to, or it has to, for whatever reason, get on the agenda then, it gives me that, hey, if you don't get it to us at least 2 weeks before, so we can properly review it, properly notice the meeting, all of you, there's no chance that it's getting on. Like, you're gonna have to wait.
Right, yeah.
That's what that's there
Okay.
for. Yeah. But we can do, just because you get it to us, this is your point, 2 weeks prior, doesn't necessarily mean it's getting on the agenda.
Correct.
And
Yes.
it would also be nice, if, like, we got our agenda for next week on Wednesday.
Yeah, I try to do it.
No, I'm not being critical of you.
Yeah.
And then there is the thing.
I
that-
try.
You've heard, I always anticipate that.
I
you get
try.
criticism.
And in it was said American Housing.
Oh, he calls me and beats me up on the phone.
But the thing is, if the application should be distributed to the board, not on an attachment to an agenda.
Yes, and
Okay, here is a potential application.
Right, yeah.
Okay, versus, page 99 through 172 of our agenda.
Which never gets printed out. Or,
But, yeah,
right. Well, for the record, Victoria and I do try very hard not to let that happen, and we wanted to bump that particular resolution for that reason. But unfortunately, the LIBOR rate expires and it's got to get closed or else there'll be no terms for those bonds. So, I did discuss it with them and
But-
that.
Okay. That's not an
But to
application.
your point,
Yeah.
well, it
Yeah.
is kind of. They're coming back for revision of
Mhm.
benefits. It's a refi, essentially. So, especially when you have half a new board that
Mhm.
has no idea what this project even is. So, but that's an example of that and the port last time, that it's coming onto the agenda when you haven't even seen it. So that's what we're trying to avoid with this.
I could have looked at that personally. There would be a chance that I would have looked at that agenda Wednesday morning.
I know.
Okay, not before I walked in, and said, oh my God, I got to recuse myself.
No,
So-
I know.
all right, well, that sort of.
So do you want to leave it no later than 2 weeks, or do you want to change that?
Well, I mean, I guess if that's the point, I just don't want to necessarily be locked into, we then have to act in 2 weeks, because we may not be ready to do that. So, I don't know if we need it, but,
Well, can we soften the language and just say, like, for potential consideration, an application has to be.
This is why I call you editor in chief.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's why I
Yeah.
started the meeting with.
Yeah.
but that's fine.
Now, in dovetailing on what you were saying earlier about kind of like a executive summary or preliminary application, at this point at the juncture, is that what they're submitting, or are they submitting the full application 2 weeks prior to
They've got to do the whole
the
thing.
full?
Yeah.
Okay.
But we would bog you down with who's going to jail and we would just give you the executive
Yeah.
summary, unless you wanted the whole thing. You're the board.
But it may
You
not
can
be
have-
complete. You can have the
Yeah.
whole thing, but it may
Yeah.
not be complete, and there's
Right.
no reason to hold up an initial discussion of a project
Exactly.
that is well explained,
Right.
but not necessarily all the supplemental documentation is there. But we have enough information to go and say, let's take this to the next level.
Right.
You don't have to know everything about a girl to decide whether you want to have a second date with her, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You should.
I think it's been a long time since I've had a date, but but anyway, so we can still, I mean, if you want to leave it in, that's fine. But then in that same paragraph, number 2, so once the application is deemed complete, staff will inform the applicant that the application is advancing for board review, and at that time, staff will invoice the applicant for the non-refundable fee. Once the non-refundable fee is paid, the application will be placed on the agenda of the next board meeting. So I'll make sure I understand. They submit the application, it goes through some kind of preliminary review, then we bill them for the cost, and then we really start discussing. We get the money up front before we seriously
Yeah.
consider the application.
And this goes to the discussion on the fee schedule where Dick had the suggestion and you approved that the fees go hard, like they're non-refundable.
Right,
Because you're gonna do all this work, council's gonna look, and so that dovetails with the fee schedule. So there'll be the application fee up front, that $750 or whatever it was. And then once you're gonna move forward, that was that range of fees you approved that, we would get, because if it doesn't close, we've done all this work and staff time has been, so that kind of reads, that's why we would get those fees up front.
It's got to be economic motivation for them.
Yeah.
Correct.
okay. I would just put on Victor's hat and become the editor-in-chief for
Yeah,
a minute.
yeah.
I don't want to usurp your
No,
role
no,
anymore.
we're all part of the same team.
Okay. But, on that sentence begins, once the application is deemed complete, I would just strike, staff will inform the applicant that the application is advancing for board review. And at that time, and just say, once the application is deemed complete, staff will invoice the applicant for the non-refundable application acceptance fee. And once the fee is paid, the application will be submitted to the board for its consideration, without talking about next board meeting and all that kind of stuff. We're just gonna, it goes to the board. And then,
Got it.
then when you get to steps 3, 4, and 5, I think that's the discussion we were sort of just having as to how many meetings we have, when we should have the meeting. I don't know if the public hearing should precede a board review for the first time, or how, or whether we have to, whether we review it and then we decide we need a public hearing. Is that sort of the
Well, you
the
have to have
sequencing?
one.
Right. Well, we have
So-
to have for only over a certain dollar value. correct?
Yes,
So it's not,
How much,
what's it,
I
100,000
think
in
it's
financial
100,000,
assistance? I think
yeah.
it's the amount of
it's
financial
most
assistance.
projects, to be
Yeah,
honest.
why would we waste our time for a project under 100,000? How could it possibly be needed? I just,
Right,
what?
right.
Well, okay, yeah, I mean, I think most
Yeah.
likely you would need but should the public hearing then be sooner than, or where should the initial review by the board,
public
come in, the
meeting-
public hearing, and then the sort of the more in-depth discussion by the board occur? What's the sequence?
Well, the first meeting that we put in here
Yeah.
now, it becomes that first look, we'll call it that. The second meeting is where we invite the applicant to come and talk to you and present.
Right,
So it seemed to me the logical next step after that would be, okay, well, what does the public have to say or not say usually? And then, then once you have all that, and if there's any comments that maybe you want to hear it or review it, consider it, because it's part of the entire record, then you would move to that final third meeting where you would say yes or no.
And the final third meeting, that could be a year later. I mean, it's not sequence, it's not.
Correct.
it's not monthly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
okay. But then,
Right.
all right, then, so maybe we should have number 3, I don't know, should number 3 then be like an initial board review or something like that?
It's like one between.
Yeah, so number 3, I put that first meeting in there, the first look, the initial,
Right,
The introduction.
and then the board review became the second meeting.
We call
Second.
the first introduction
Right.
of project to the board.
Yeah.
That's
something
what
like that.
Okay.
And then the Dick's earlier point of half an hour ago, when we started this discussion, on number 3, I would strike once the application is deemed complete, because we can say once notification that the application has been advanced to the board, the applicant shall prepare and provide a preliminary presentation. Because this can all be happening sort of simultaneously, And at that time, the board will provide its observation, ask questions, request supplemental information, and provide direction to staff.
Okay.
I don't think we have to put in, I had it in the, could we provide a preliminary presentation to the board at a mutually convenient, scheduled board meeting or something, but I don't know that we necessarily need to do you want to make sure that it has to be at a board meeting as opposed to provide preliminary presentation to the board at a mutually convenient scheduled board meeting? So it wouldn't necessarily have to be in 2 weeks. It could be in a month. It could be whenever they can get the stuff done.
Right,
Or do we-
it's really, if they're not ready to come in, then that's on
Right.
them. We wouldn't
Right.
have,
But we just say preliminary presentation to the board. Do we need to go to the next step? Say it's got to be at a public board meeting.
it does.
Yeah, so maybe we need
All board
that.
meetings are public.
Right, but they just can't come in informally and talk to us.
No,
So
no.
at the end, provide a preliminary presentation to the board at a mutually convenient scheduled board meeting or something like that.
Okay.
So, we can talk to them and say, can you be ready in 2 weeks? Can you be ready in 6 weeks? Do we need a special meeting, because you're in a hurry or whatever, that kind of thing. And then you would have the public hearing,
Should
correct?
that be as required by regulation versus as directed by manual? Isn't there a regulation that requires a public meeting so many days with so much notice?
No. We have to notice a public meeting within 72 hours, but that's when we know when it's gonna, like, there's no waiting period or aging period for that.
So we can, unfortunately, decide 72 hours in advance and publish it in the Evangelist that we're having a public meeting. What?
A special meeting, yes, but we would have to have everything we're looking at,
Or the Jewish
Or
one.
the Yankee
Published.
Clip, or the Clipper magazine, or whatever. it
yeah,
is.
published.
You can't get 72 hours notice.
Usually,
Metro Land used to make their money doing that.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
well, you
Right
have to
after
publish a
commercials.
hearing. You don't have to publish, like, it's got to be on our front door and it's got to be on the website, for public meetings. Public hearings, there's a publication requirement.
So there is a requirement.
No, not for public meetings.
For
That's what we're,
public hearing.
for the hearing.
That's what
yes.
I'm for,
Oh,
as required by
Yeah.
regulation. I mean, as directed by manual, that was my point, number 4. We have a requirement.
right. And the reference to the manual is where that requirement is.
Yeah. So you're saying, as opposed to saying as directed by, as required
As
by
required
state
by law.
law or
That's
something?
fine.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what's fine,
yeah,
okay.
okay.
That's better than regulation.
Right, so it's, okay, as required by law, then the board, I would say, shall schedule a public hearing as opposed to will request.
Yeah,
Yeah, we shall
Okay.
schedule a public hearing to be held.
Well, you have to approve a resolution requesting that to be approved. That's why it's written that way.
Yeah.
So. as
Well, we can
board
schedule,
of
no, we can
directors-
still be, we shall schedule a hearing, but there are steps that we have to take to schedule it, that you don't necessarily have to lay out in the process, I don't think.
Board of directors will,
Or I would say shall, will schedule, shall schedule a
Okay.
public hearing.
Okay.
I don't think they then need to be held. Shall schedule a public hearing. The applicant will be expected to prepare and provide presentation, blah, 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 blah.
okay. And usually, again, you reach out to the applicant and you decide when they can come, and then
Exactly.
you'll notice.
Which we
it.
said in before,
Yeah.
because you need it's gotta be done at a mutually convenient time. And number 5, the board will consider the application, possibly review each project. So that's sort of, again, do we have to say, yes, any action shall be taken or such action shall be taken? We'll consider the application presentation for the hearing before taking action. And then such action shall be taken at a scheduled public board meeting. So we don't have anything in here that says it has to be done at an official board meeting, right? In number 5.
Right, it's whenever we're ready to have that.
Right, but it's
yeah.
gotta be the action that you talked about in the first sentence from the public hearing before taking action. I would just add a sentence that says, such action shall be taken at a scheduled public board meeting.
Okay,
So we don't, so it's clear that it's gotta be done. So if the applicant says, I need this tomorrow, you can say, well, the process, so we have to do this publicly at a board meeting. We can't just give you verbal approval.
I was surprised that we didn't have the board didn't have to attend the public hearing and we don't need a quorum. I just was surprised when we had the public hearing.
Right.
It was odd, we weren't required to go, I went, but it was a little strange
Yeah.
well, you do get the transcript, so if you weren't able to be present, and sometimes, most of the time, really nobody shows, so it's really just reading everything into the record and,
So it's not unusual that board members don't.
No, not unusual.
Because we're not taking a formal vote.
No,
or
No,
anything.
you're just-
Yeah, but as a board member, I
Information.
wanted to hear if somebody was there.
But we can't ask questions either at the hearing.
Well, right.
So-
And there's a transcript, like there's a steno, like it's a real, so, I think you're all volunteers too.
Yeah.
You might not be able to go to the hearing for whatever reason, but you definitely are entitled to see the transcript, and it's published with the whole record of the transaction.
If we have a public hearing and people get up and talk against it, we don't have a Q&A, we don't have the ability to ask questions.
No,
We just,
usually no, it's just comment.
period.
But I suppose you could, if someone raised, if you were there
Yeah,
and someone raised an objection, I think, I don't think we're prohibited from saying, could you explain that further, or what specific is or that objection has been.
so we're not, it just, if we wanted to ask a question, we could,
Yes.
like get kicked.
Well,
Yeah.
keep in mind that usually it's the applicant who's there to answer the questions, right? And here's the project. You are the approving authority.
Mhm.
So if there's a specific question about process, that's one thing. But if it's usually about the project or an objection or anything like that, it's the applicant that has to respond to that.
But, and then we have to discuss it in an open meeting.
Well, yeah, the public hearing transcript then becomes part of the application, and all the materials you review before you go to that. Like, that might be a reason where you say, we don't want it on this month's meeting. We need more time to take a look at, what's been said and, all of that. And, if there was opposition or things that you wanted to discuss that were in there at that third meeting or fourth meeting, you would. That's where you would discuss it.
In open meeting.
Yes.
And hopefully this initial board review has answered a lot of our questions in terms of the project with the applicant. And then there is a question, responding to a public comment that,
If we had our public hearing on, just say the port, and the Glenmont neighbors came into the public hearing and articulated their concerns about the environmental issues. Okay, then I would think that if we were aware of it, we probably would have had a discussion about it at our next board meeting. We might still have approved it, probably we would have, but we would have had an open discussion about it.
Because along with your approvals, there's different resolutions. There's the approving resolutions of the actual transaction, but there's usually a seeker resolution where essentially that we're adopting the town planning board's seeker review. They're the lead agency. So sometimes that's voluminous, but we should be reading through that to see the compilation, like what did the public say at those hearings. But it can get pretty extensive for volunteers to really review that.
and we haven't had a whole lot of comment.
True.
Oh, no,
But you want to make, somebody could just have a personal beef with somebody, and so they get up and they say, I don't want this project because, I know the guy who's,
carpetbagger.
I used to work there and they fired me 10 years ago
Yeah,
or something like that, and I don't want them expanding into our,
I heard a rumor. No.
yeah, no, exactly. And
Right, yeah.
I saw on TikTok.
yeah. Okay. So let's go through again. There'll still be a pre-submittal conference, then there'll be the submission of an application. No later than 2 weeks prior to the regular scheduled board meeting. And then we're changing the bottom of that paragraph to once the application is deemed complete, the staff will invoice the applicant for non-refundable fee, and then it'll be submitted to the board for its consideration. Then we're gonna have 3 is gonna be changed to initial or preliminary board review or whatever.
That's going to be public meeting number 2.
Okay.
Where the applicant comes in.
Right, okay.
Yep.
Okay. The applicant will prepare a preliminary presentation, which will be then mutually scheduled convenient time and all that stuff. Then we're gonna have the public hearing with, I guess it's
Required by
by
state
state
law.
law, the board shall schedule a public hearing and the applicant, at which time the applicant will be expected to prepare and provide, or whatever we want to
Yeah.
say. Then we're gonna have the board approval, and again, we're just gonna have a sentence that said the action has to be taken at a scheduled board meeting.
Yep.
And then I don't think we have any issue with closing. Then on the application itself, the only other question I had is on page 3, we have talked about economic and fiscal impact. We say in the space provided below and or in the attachment of this application, provide information about the project's economic and fiscal impact on the economy of Albany County.
Oh.
Should we talk about town of Bethlehem as well?
Where's,
It's this on the summary sheet here, or whatever it's called. The thing is an attachment, the town application for enhanced tax rebate abatement.
What page?
It's on page, it's a 4-page document. This is on the 3rd page.
So it's not on page 1 of 44, it's after that?
Well, it's not, no, it's all, I think it was part of the package.
Yeah, I got 60.
Town of Bethlehem Industrial Development Agency application for enhanced tax abatement.
oh, the enhanced.
Enhanced, yeah. But I
Yeah,
think this is part
this-
of this process. or
This was a
something.
pre-existing,
Oh, okay,
so I don't know, this is what we have right now.
okay.
So if there's a error in there.
Well, it's not an error, but under 3, I can just show you. Under 3, we just have the impact on Albany County, and we should probably put in there town of Bethlehem.
So page 3.
Yeah, page
Okay.
3 or 4. This one, I think
Of the enhanced.
we're more concerned about how it impacts us than the county as a whole, but I think it's important that we understand that.
That's so strange. Yeah, it does.
Equalize. I thought Victor was the editor in chief.
Oh, I had a reputation in the EBO. Nothing got by my eye.
I've noticed.
It shows I read stuff, Dick. I don't wait till Wednesday morning.
Okay, are you,
And I 8 o'clock
is
to read this
that's
stuff.
after the uniform tax exemption policy?
There's the enhanced, there's, I gave you the two, just for ease, the 2 applications we use. One is for standard abatements, I think it's
Okay, yeah.
the 10-year, and then the second one is enhanced, that's a 12-year, where you might go to 12 years if there's certain factors. Those are the 2 current applications, and then I
I got it
provided
here, I got it. It's-
the
Okay.
UTEP, because there is criteria in the UTEP by which you previously
I
made.
got UTEP questions.
Okay,
Okay.
and then this matrix was just, here's what some of the other agencies are using, if you want to consider
The
it.
project evaluation?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, because that's where Westchester County comes
Yes.
in. And a few other things here that I don't think are applicable. The scoring system, basically.
Mhm.
right?
Right,
Um,
I didn't personally love that either.
Yeah.
It was suggested to me
Okay, but
to
this is,
include it, but
was this,
you want to come up with your own.
yeah, I don't know, we necessarily need to talk about this today. I'm not sure why we're concerned about parking.
But what, parking?
Parking, you know.
Right,
No.
The project has to provide parking or something.
so your
That's-
criteria is in your
That's
UTEP,
ordinance.
page 2.
That would be zoning. Yeah, that's big in the town of Colony.
So
can't.
it would seem to me that your matrix would play off of your UTEP. On page 2, there's 17 criteria
Yeah,
that Dick has comments on.
well, I'll let the editors in chief go into the,
I'll arm wrestle you for the title.
There you go.
no, but
We can have a power sharing.
That's what- yeah, yeah.
the questions I have on the uniform tax exemption policy, and maybe shouldn't clawback be in there? I don't see where clawback is in here. Maybe it's there, but, you know.
It's in a separate, I forget what the name of the document is called, but it's in a separate, here it, yeah, the recapture agreement.
Where? Oh, is it
Page 8, section 5, recapture of tax exemptions.
page 8, section?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, this is just criteria for whether it's something qualifies. It's not what we do on the case study.
Yeah, I mean, it gives us the power to recapture, but it's just a few paragraphs on that.
okay.
But the criteria was really why I circulated this, because I think David had the same, why are you circulating this? Because 1 through 17 is what your policy is that says that you're going to consider.
Mhm.
So I don't know that we ever went through a matrix or we ever really pulled this out and, you know, started checking the boxes. But it would seem to me that if you're going to document your whole process and the basis for approving or disapproving a project, you probably should put some of this in the record of what you looked at and, right?
Right,
Yeah.
I'm wholehearted except for exceptions. Yeah. When we have no, but we want to do it anyhow. This goes back
So your
to,
matrix, you know, if you, I think you have to look at this 17 and decide whether that's a true and accurate representation of what you're thinking you should use. And if you want to change that, we would then change the UTEP, and then that would really become your matrix. You know what I mean, of what you're going to look at.
Mhm.
So that's all I wanted to do really today, was put it in front of you to think about it that way.
isn't this
and
what
then-
Victoria gave you marching orders on?
Well, yeah, you know, take a look at this, not the whole UTEP, you know, but just specifically the 17, you know, criteria, and what do you think about that, and should we change any of it? Because that'll carry through to your review of the, the review of the applications and the,
But what about B?
what about the exceptions?
Yes. And we go through all this machinations of 1 through 17, and then we say, we're gonna do it anyhow.
Well, I think the reason for that is if for some reason you go through the 17 and find yourself, you know, not checking these boxes, you know, or it doesn't really comply with what you're looking at, if there, through that analysis, there becomes another reason why you would want to approve it. The exceptions gives you the authority to do that, and then you would put that on the record.
I can
Right.
comprehend that.
Okay.
Okay, very much, but, you know, we don't have to go, okay, do we go through a grueling exercise of 1 through 17 and say, screw it, we're gonna prove it anyhow?
And that's precisely my point. The policy does want you to walk through that first, as it's first in order in the policy.
Okay,
And then, yes,
because our exercise at the last board meeting, you know, that's what, the 3 items that we discussed, I don't, you know, and then I went to here, okay, no, of course we're gonna do it. I don't have an issue, I just want to somehow, maybe my point is, if we're gonna have an exception, we have to have, maybe we have to have some sort of document to document the exception.
exactly.
Does it say that?
Well, I think you would create your record. You know, we're approving it because maybe, you know, 5 of these things are a good reason to approve it, but also because, and then if it doesn't fall within one of those 17, you would put it in your approving resolutions and discuss it on the record about why you were making that decision. And then it becomes part of your minutes and your record.
I think some of these 17 go back to, you know, that summary document that I keep talking about. If they're going to describe the project, they're going to have to talk about the nature of the project, the economic impact, the public support, whether financial assistance is needed, whatever some of these 17 are. And so that I don't know how rigorous that's going to be, because it's going to show up in the application. It's rigorous on the applicant to explain how they meet all these criteria that we might lay out. But then we always have the exception to approve or reject. You can reject a project too that meets every criteria.
Oh, for
So
sure.
you always have to have the exception of approving something or disapprove it, but it would then we would have to be on the record as to why we did it. So if we come back and someone wanted to sue us or someone raised an objection, you know, we approved a similar project 5 years ago and now this one is being rejected. Why are we doing that? So I think there would be any exception that we take one way or the other would have to be documented public, in some public way.
See, I tend, because of my litigation background, I tend to want to create, and you're going to have a couple applications, I'm sure, by the end of the year, more of a record than maybe you're used to in the past, where I really want a lot of what you're saying, and also in the minutes and in the resolutions for that very reason. Because it's not a problem until it is, right? Somebody turns around and pulls an Article 78 and there's nothing for me to defend you with,
Nothing.
right? So, I really want us to be better about that. And this is a huge part of it,
Mhm.
So is that it, or is there changes you want to make to language? Or are you just pointing
I like
out we
that.
can do what we want?
But we have that right under.
Right.
We're bored. We can.
Oh, no, I'm
As
not.
long as we document it and explain ourselves.
But it doesn't say, okay. I'm not articulating this well, but shouldn't there be an overall documentation, which is what we're, documentation policy then? We have this in determination, 1 through 17 and B exceptions. We have sections 1703 general provisions.
Well, if you
The
look,
general policy of the H is to grant exemption here, blah, blah, blah. To grant and document. I mean, shouldn't maybe we write in section 1703 general provisions, we have a documentation requirement?
I think where that goes is after, I think it's maybe a new subsection C after exceptions about documenting it. Any
But the
decision.
documentation should be in not only exceptions, it should be in 1 through
Everything,
17.
everything has to be documented.
Yeah, so we have a documentation criteria.
Yeah, so I think, I can understand Dick's point. If it's a general provision, one of the general provisions is the board doesn't do anything without documenting it.
Right,
It doesn't take any official action without proper documentation.
so we have a major.
In support of its decision, or justifying its decision, or whatever you want to say.
Mhm.
If you look at the exceptions paragraph as well, it does sort of lay out additional criteria for us to make an exception. So there's that. It does put some parameters around it.
Right.
Okay, but we're smart enough to figure out a way to get into, to make it work. I mean, as long as it's documented, that's all.
But I guess the question is, we can approve a project that doesn't meet all the criteria of the UTEP.
Right.
And it's documented in the sense that it's going to be a public vote. But I think what you're talking about is now we have to also explain in some kind of written format why we are accepting them from the process.
Just take the port, okay? It creates jobs, and also it's a green initiative,
Mhm.
okay? And it's manufacturing. So we can justify it. We can justify the port, even though if you go through ones in 17, probably a lot of them don't check the box.
What that looks like right now is in the resolution and the whereas paragraphs that begin the resolutions for approval. It refers back to our approval through the UTEP process. It's very general,
Right,
in the
right, yeah.
resolutions. I think the documentation also comes in your recorded discussion and the minutes as well. But I know in certain instances, Joe Scott and I have worked on expanding resolution language to be specific, which we could. But it does right now usually refer back to, the policy and that you've followed your policy, your UTEP, and the criteria is in there. So that's how it reads together right now.
I can say we didn't follow this policy.
Well, you will be,
I know.
because I'm going to pull it out. Because
No,
David's
no.
like, why are we using this? Well, it's the
I think
entire policy of how you're supposed to
Okay,
make.
maybe it's me, but I didn't know this policy existed until I read the minutes, the agenda. Okay, I didn't even know.
Shame.
What does those letters mean? I didn't even know what it meant.
UTEP?
Did you get my email? I emailed you about.
Yeah, I thought I got something that you had. Oh, yes.
What is it? What did you
I
tell
was
me?
out of town. I just ignored
Don't worry about it. It came back through.
I was in town, so I said I don't need
It
it.
doesn't matter.
This policy is the whole legislative purpose of an IDA.
Yeah. See, I think I would rather be the editor-in-chief than the sheriff.
Any day.
I thought this was gonna be a quick.
I love being the sheriff. I have no problem with it.
But I think we need to state our reasons for exempting something. Yeah, almost separately somewhere.
Mhm.
And then the whereases and all that are just reinforcing whatever it is our decision, but there has to be almost like somewhere someone can go and just read a paragraph that says, here's why the board is approving this project or disapproving this project, even though it meets or fails to meet the criteria. And then that gets translated into whereas. Is that okay? So we need something in there. Maybe it's just in the that first day, general policy, everything has to be documented.
Yeah, that was my point.
Well, I think when you're discussing it at a board meeting and you're ready to vote, the motion, whoever makes the motion says, we pretty much have to say into the record that gets recorded in the minutes, specifically why it's being approved.
Right. You can't just say, I propose that we exempt the project.
Because that's normally what you do.
Yeah.
But I've seen it come back where there's not enough on the record to say why or why not. And it's caused, you can't defend that. So. All right, I'll come up with something.
Or even under the B, I guess you could say under sub, the agency reserves the right to deviate from such policy in special circumstances. And the criteria of the decision to exempt the project shall be explained in writing or something like that, whatever you want to say.
Should be documented.
Should be documented, yeah. Okay. So we jumped ahead to the UTEP. The only other thing is whether, I don't know what your schedule looks like.
Yeah, I have to leave in about 15 minutes.
Okay. And the only other thing is on the agenda is reviewing the current IDA application. And again, this is where I have a lot of questions, and I think, I'm more than happy to write something out and present it. I mean, my objective is to take that 44-page application and break it up really into like two parts. One is the summary of the application that we can get up front, or we can read common English, why it works. And then the second is all this criteria that are laid out there, and we can proceed with a project based on the summary explanation, hopefully it has enough information that we can then decide it's worth pursuing or not pursuing. And if we do pursue it, then the rest of the stuff can follow later or be more complete. They have to submit everything.
Sure.
but it may be that it's incomplete, but we understand the project enough to consider what the other 36 pages of the application have to be further explained and researched.
Are there any of your other IDAs electronically submission, the application?
Oh, yes.
Should we, I mean,
Yeah.
shouldn't that be our objective, is to go
Yeah,
electronic?
We can do that. I can talk to John Taylor about it. It's really just building out the form on the website. But, that being said, I don't know, we don't get a huge volume, like the city of Albany has much more, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know, I mean, yes, it's gonna spit out the form and the information in the back, but how is it any different than a typed up application? Not really.
Well,
The only thing I can think of is when the attachments are voluminous, it's easier to upload to a platform in a form than it is to send an email. That's probably why, like, the whole record comes together, it's easier. You can't email documents if they become too large. So that's probably one of the reasons to go to electronic. So let me talk to John Taylor about it.
Yeah, but also if you give somebody 2 lines to explain the project and they're writing it out by hand, they're going to take 2 lines. Or if it's they have to type it in, they can take 1,000 words to explain it, which is helpful to us.
Right.
So.
All right. Yeah.
So I think it'd be easier. Yeah, if the applicant can fill this out online and submit it, that's. I think,
is there a canned application that we can,
well, we'd have to create it.
well, if other IDAs have it, are they,
Yeah, there's examples.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I mean, okay.
Okay.
But if we're gonna just table that, I'll try and type up what my thoughts are on this and circulate it. And we don't have to, the legislature waits for no man, so you got to get down there, right? So.
And I think Victoria too will have some thoughts on really the part 2, the more technical.
Right.
That's really where her.
Yeah, and that's, I think, I'm trying to make it helpful for the board to get a simplified document where, in your own words, you're explaining what this project is all about and why you're coming to us for assistance, and we understand it. And that's what we would, I think, get a hearing, sort of raise questions about and stuff. And then the last item on the agenda is a process for reviewing remaining policies. We do have, I don't know, 42 policies or something?
Yeah,
like that?
I mean, I think you've got enough work, like, this is important.
Yeah.
So, I don't see anything that is necessarily, dying for attention. But at some point, you probably want to, kind of go through and just see if there's anything else that needs to be changed.
I think we can do that on our own if you just take an interest in something. I assume Victor, maybe you can help us. There's nothing that the legislature has done recently that would direct us to change any particular policy, right?
No, we monitor that too, and so does the SDC, specific to IDAs. The latest was that report we got from Shannon a while back.
Yeah. Okay.
It was more about taxing jurisdictions than notice and anything else, so.
Well, I'm going to ask Robin if she has that policy.
Yeah, if she's got it handy, that would be great, but I'd have to go through thousands of documents to try to find that. And
I know we passed it at the board meeting, and it was pre-pandemic, because we didn't have committee meetings in person. And I just don't have it.
Whatever, even if you did change it, Dick, it didn't make it to editing of the document, because the document I produced came off the website, so it didn't get carried through either. That's why we wound up with what I handed you.
Okay, but I'm gonna say that, the, keeping the website current was not a priority.
Well, the policy matched, yeah, it matches what was in, I guess what I'm saying is the document itself never got edited, from what I can tell. That's all.
Because no, it did, because it was passed by the board, because we had advance. It got passed by the board because we, yeah,
So there's some version out there then?
yeah, because that's how we got Trusco in and HSBC out. And there was somebody else who went out too. And somebody else wanted to come in. A Citizens Guide, 5.5% for, we can get for 9 months.
Yeah, is that what it is? It's 9 months?
10 months for an individual, 9 months for business.
Oh, okay.
So I want to bring a resolution on Wednesday and move a couple $100,000 into the 9 months for citizens.
That's our bad too. We have to think about moving some money into.
Yeah, we didn't get the money yet. I'll send back.
No, not that I know of.
We have another payment from Plug coming
Oh, okay.
for Plug 2.
Oh, the new building.
Yeah. Some odd thousand. Was it more?
It's, I can't remember, but it's significant.
Mm.
6 figures.
Yeah,
Well,
good gift.
yeah.
It's-
Okay. Is there any other business that anyone wants to discuss? With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? No.
9/12.
9:12. This meeting is now adjourned at 9:12. Thank you all for coming.